This video is brought to you by Brilliant. At the last German federal election in 2021, the German Greens achieved their best ever result, winning 15% of the vote and emerging as the second largest party in Olaf Scholz's traffic light coalition. Today, however, their fortunes have reversed. They're currently polling around 10%, down from a high of 23% in mid-2022, and more than a third of Germans want the Green Party to have no role in the next government. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the German Greens' meteoric rise to power and how it all went wrong. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop when we release new videos. Let's start with some context. The Green Party, or Die Grünen, emerged as a fringe movement out of the student revolts of the late 1960s. Positioning themselves as an anti-party during the height of the Cold War, the Green Party advocated for a bold agenda that focused on phasing out nuclear power while championing feminism and pacifism. In the 80s, the party experienced its first electoral success and sent its first representatives to the state parliaments after winning 5.6% of the vote in the 1983 federal election. 10 years later, following the reunification of East and West Germany, the Green Party merged with its eastern partner, Alliance 90, and together joined the federal government for the first time in 1998, becoming part of a red-green coalition led by the Social Democratic Party, or SPD. With newfound power and 3 ministers in the federal government, the party faced an internal split between the Fundis and the Realos. The Fundis opposed coalitions with parties they deemed incompatible with green principles, while the Realos believed that forming alliances was essential for advancing their ideas and affecting societal change. In the 2000s, the Realos ultimately prevailed over the Fundis. Joschka Fischer, the Green Party's first foreign minister, endorsed NATO's bombing campaign in Yugoslavia, and then the US's intervention in Afghanistan. The party also soon turned away from its anti-capitalist stance, calling for an ecological and social market economy, and supported controversial labour market reforms carried out under the SPD Chancellor Gerhard Schröder. These ideological contortions caused some serious discontent among the party members, and the party's credibility became more tarnished. Then, for the next few years, while sitting on the opposition benches, the party sought to rebuild their popularity and relevance, after other, more mainstream political parties also began adopting green policies. In 2011, German outrage over the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster in Japan buoyed support for the Greens. Polling at the time suggested that 1/5 of Germans supported the Greens, and the party made impressive gains in state elections, particularly in the Christian Democratic Union's, or CDU's, stronghold, Baden-Württemberg. By 2016, the Greens had joined 11 out of 16 state governments in a variety of coalitions, but were kept out of power at the federal level by a grand coalition between the SPD and the CDU, or CSU. Nevertheless, by this point, the Greens had become one of the largest opposition parties in Germany. Between 2017 and 2019, party membership increased more than any other party, and the 2021 federal elections marked their best ever result, driven by the support of educated young voters. The party secured 15% of the vote in 2021, nearly double what they received in 2017. They also won 16 constituency seats and made the greatest gains of any party. And in some sense, this was a disappointing result. The Greens were polling at 30% days ahead of the elections, and even elected a chancellor candidate. But a series of mishaps and blunders by the party's co-leader meant the Greens still, in a sense, fell short. Nonetheless, the party entered the federal government once again as the second largest party in Olaf Scholz's traffic light coalition, alongside the SPD and the Free Democratic Party, or FDP, a neoliberal party that also performed well with young, educated voters. However, ever since joining this coalition, the Greens' popularity has suffered, and this year has been particularly brutal. They saw a massive drop in votes at this summer's European Parliament elections, experiencing the largest loss of Green MPs among all EU countries. They also suffered a series of crushing defeats in recent state elections, where they were wiped out in Thuringia and Brandenburg, and only narrowly retained representation in Saxony. This decline has been driven by a collapse in the number of young people supporting the Greens. In the European elections, just 11% of 16 to 24-year-olds voted for the Greens, down from nearer to a third. Meanwhile, the Brandenburg poll recorded a 24% decline in support among the same cohort. Furthermore, the party is polling at its lowest level in 7 years, and this September, the Green co-leaders announced their resignations after calling for a radical re-evaluation of the struggling party's direction. So, what exactly went wrong for the Greens? Well, the way we see it, there are at least 3 key reasons. The first and most simplest is that public interest in the issue of climate change has just fallen. According to Eurobarometer polls, in 2019, Germans identified the environment as the most pressing issue facing their country. However, 5 years later, the German public, along with most other EU citizens, see the cost of living as the biggest issue facing the country. Secondly, being an anti-establishment party and upholding radical credentials whilst in government is pretty hard, and as a result, they've made some pretty unpopular policy decisions. Aimed at appeasing their coalition partners, they approved stronger restrictions for refugees, the provision of extra resources for the military, and the destruction of a village called Lützerath for coal mining. These decisions led to en masse resignations of Green youth leaders, who generally hail from the party's more radical left wing, after they accused the party leadership of shifting too far to the right. This issue has then been exacerbated by the stubbornness of the FDP, who've refused to agree to basically any increases in government spending. At the same time, the Greens have refused to be more pragmatic in other ideological or identity-defining policy areas, like denuclearization. Last year, Germany abruptly shut down its last nuclear power stations, just as the loss of cheap Russian gas drove energy prices to uncompetitive heights. Their demands for clean energy were also seen as a threat to German industry and imposing too steep a burden on ordinary German households. The best evidence for this was last year's heat pump scandal, when the German government had to water down a green proposal requiring German households to install heat pumps instead of gas boilers, provoking widespread backlash. Thus, the party garnered a reputation for being elitist and out of touch, pushing Green voters, especially younger ones, towards other anti-establishment parties, which have seen a surge in youth support. Finally, all this has been made worse by a series of blunders, scandals, and a widespread sense that the Greens are just incompetent. From a report finding that Green ministers lied about safety issues to quickly shut down nuclear plants, to a cronyism scandal that forced Economy Minister Robert Habeck to sack his closest aide, the Greens haven't fared well in avoiding controversy, and they now look a lot more like normal politicians. Now, as you've hopefully realised from having watched an 8-minute video about German Green politics, you'll have noticed that here at TLDR News, we're committed to helping you learn. Fortunately, the sponsor for today's video shares this commitment and is one of the best websites on the internet to help you learn new skills from the ground up. That website is, you've guessed it, Brilliant. Now, one of the best things about Brilliant is that rather than simply throwing in information at you and testing you on it, Brilliant teaches you by doing. Each of their lessons is filled with hands-on lessons in problem solving that lets you actually play with the concepts. This has proven to be 6 times more effective than simply watching lecture videos. And what's more, Brilliant actually helps you do all this learning wherever you are. You can complete their lessons on your phone, so you can easily utilize any spare minutes that you've got in the day with actually worthwhile learning. You can try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days. Just click on the link in the description. That way, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.